Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guildhouse. This is a weekly podcast where I, your host Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the tabletop RPG and DM's Guild. And if you're making RPGs, I'm probably going to chat to you one day. And this week I have the honor to speak with Wyatt Trull. Thank you very much.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
As I say, you may be in contention for the the largest distance from me to you in terms of like interviewee to interviewer.
Who's the runner-up?
I think again I'm really bad when it comes to I was about to say geology, but it's more I think Australia is a close contention, but then again my understanding of the curvature of the Earth is I was about to say my understanding of the curvature of the Earth is flat, but I feel like that's low-hanging fruit. That aside, let's stay on topic. Thank you so much for joining me. But for the people kind of listening, then, what sort of products have you been creating?
I've been working on encounters mostly. About a year and a half ago, I released Darden's 101 Seafaring Encounters. Encounter design is my favorite part of designing because it's mostly like a short story to me. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I've released Darden's Class Feats, which if I may say, was groundbreaking, I guess. No one else had ever had the idea of it, to add feats to classes. In fact, I got really paranoid and thought someone else was working on that. So that's why I rushed to put it at the top of my schedule and try to get it out.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm known for The Wedding at Ravenloft, a supplement designed to be the end of Curse of Strahd, and the Dungeon of the Mad Mage Companion, which goes through every level of Dungeon of the Mad Mage and adds a story to it, in which Halaster Blackcloak is running a transplanter game show game show, and the adventurers are the unwilling participants thereof.
I was going to say, so looking at kind of like your catalog of like products and everything you kind of been working on, it's kind of interesting seeing like the expansions of some of the hardcover books that you've kind of gone in, and like from first kind of having a powerful capstone to the like Curse of Strahd, which again sometimes in playing, because it's quite open, it's you don't always know when the story is going to end, and sometimes it's a case of like, oh, we just walk into the castle and there's Strahd, and it's nice to kind of have like a more kind of, I guess, cinematic ending. But my kind of first question that I always kind of like off the bat is like, okay, so what was the kind of initial drive to like start publishing? Like, I take it, did you just have 101 Seafaring Encounters? Just no.
Well, I had always known that I wanted to be a writer. I got into D&D in 2016. I'm a 5e baby. In fact, my story for D&D is one day just clicked that I always wanted to play D&D and just didn't know it. And I knew some guy at school. I cornered him and demanded the phone number of his dungeon master. He gave it to me. I called up this guy, Richard. I said, hey, I can get 3 other nerds if you'll teach us D&D. And he said, sure. So I called upon my stable of nerds, and together we went to the local gaming store and played our first session of D&D, which happened to be Curse of Strahd. It had just come out, and Richard put us through the Death House. So
it's a very like anyone's introduction to D&D being the Death House is, I feel like, I don't know how it kind of sets their tone for like I think
it sets a tone of don't get too attached.
That's what I mean. And I feel like that is there are some good lessons in running like the Death House in particular, because it is a case of like, oh, I guess I should just roll another character. But then I wonder if it sends you down that kind of like path of like, I create all these characters, I have no attachment to them in any way. If they live past 3 sessions, that's a bonus. They may get a surname.
My best friend's ranger died in one hit from a crit from a certain nursemaid in the story.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think there's my funnest one is one of our one of the players at our table got themselves locked in a closet with an animated broom.
That thing. I hate that thing.
Yeah, and
I've ran Death House so many times, and I hate the broom. I hate the broom.
There's nothing worse than like when all the other characters open the closet and there's just a broom leaning up against the wall and the corpse just kind of slumps out. We're just like, okay, let's close that door. Let's not go in there.
What's behind door number 2?
So what was it particularly was the timing of the 101 Seafaring Encounters? Was it around Saltmarsh, or was this kind of beforehand?
Oh, it was written for Saltmarsh. Okay. It was a product prepared for that, but designed to be setting agnostic. I really killed myself over 3 months putting in 100 encounters, all of which had variants. They were fleshed out with magic items, monsters, motives, characters. And then I tried that again with Arctic encounters for Icewind Dale, and that killed me. So I'm not doing that anymore.
I think I must be because we're in similar boats, because I've also done kind of like I have like an items and encounter series where I've done Baldur's Gate and Waterdeep, and yeah, sometimes fleshing those out, it's nice to have the kind of ideation phase where you're just kind of like, encounters are quick to kind of come to you, just like, oh, there's this little one line in like the hardcover book which seems cool for like expansion. I can just run like, oh, you meet this character and you know they have magical fish or what have you. But I think sometimes it always finds where it comes like a numbers game, like 101. That's a lot. That
was a lot. That was a lot. I'm good friends with Val Cyrene of 100 Monster Hunt fame, and I saw that and I said, I'm gonna make this man proud. And
not just proud, but just one up him. Just
one up. That's why I had 101 encounters. Love you, Val.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like this is like a dangerous precedent to be like, oh, now there's a lot of like 103 encounter packs. There's 104.
Yeah.
But I guess what was the kind of how well, I guess what's kind of question like, so well, I guess what was your ideation process? How did you come up with 101 ideas that are each kind of distinct and unique?
So I sit down and I just start scribbling down ideas, keywords. I sort through the monster list, see what would actually work. Then I start trying to subvert tropes or monsters or make variations. I made an encounter with centaurs. How do you bring centaurs to the ocean? You make them into Ichthyo centaurs, the ones from Greek mythology with fish tails. So take the centaur stat block, say, here's how it's changed, here's a swimming speed, blah, blah, blah. And that really drove the process for the rest of them. I started seeing things in a whole new light. I can take this monster, I can mash them up and still draw upon the statistics in the monster manual.
Yeah, I suppose it is interesting to kind of take like creatures that you would think is like, there's no way this creature would survive in this environment, and be like, well, I can change it so they can. And suddenly now the players are no way expecting, you know, like I don't know. I'm trying to think of like what I wouldn't expect in the sea, and I imagine like some sort of giraffe or elephant. I think that's probably definitely up there in terms of like. But another question as well I kind of have about kind of encounter crafting is, you kind of mentioned itself, because encounters are almost like neatly contained stories, but sometimes in the stuff they can turn into almost like mini adventures. Were there anything that you kind of had to kind of like, I don't know, keep the encounters within like a set scope? Or
I did the opposite. In the product, I had 5 or 6 sample storylines that said, these encounters can be linked together to form the skeletons of a campaign or a short adventure. I had one in the Arctic encounters where a frost giant makes a deal with Vaprock, the god of trolls. There's that stat block from Volo's Guide to Monsters, the one with the misshapen frost giant with 2 heads. Can't remember the name. Anyway, so he wants to become Jarl of his frost giant clan. I made about 6 encounters that could just be woven into your campaign. You see the giants dueling. You see the Vaprock Hierophant win. Say a few weeks later, you see the frost giants start raiding in more aggressive numbers and frequency. So all those put together were basically a skeleton of an adventure, and I was really proud of that. I had several more, but in the end, it was easier to do that, and eventually it became, why am I not just making an adventure? Why am I doing 83 other encounters?
Yeah, I suppose that it is nice to kind of have those kind of like through lines, and particularly when it comes to like compilation like products, like again like encounters and stuff like that, it is nice to kind of throw in like hints or kind of like put references to some of the other encounters,
right?
And having that kind of through line of like, you could run this like, again, this entire encounter chain, but it's also sometimes nice to like being aware of like an encounter chain that could happen regardless of like the character's presence is kind of nice to kind of bring about that kind of living world of like the fact that
for the frost giant. For the frost giants, you don't have to start at square one.
Yeah,
the Jarl can start raiding in more aggressive numbers.
Yeah, and
that's the kind of living world that I want to play in and write for.
Yeah, and so then I guess kind of so the other kind of products that you kind of do is kind of, again, I guess kind of almost like companions to the kind of hardcovers. What was kind of the pivot from like, okay, well, I've done some encounters, or was it more that sometimes these companions they are kind of like a nice, they're kind of another way of writing encounters?
They're both. I love doing both of them, although companions can be a bit more annoying. Sometimes you disagree with the plot. That's what the companion is for. Usually I suggest a lot of variants. The Dungeon of the Mad Mage companion. Dungeon of the Mad Mage is not really an adventure. It's a setting, more or less, which is why I went so gung-ho with adding my own storyline to it. When it came to Rime of the Frost Maiden is a complete story. So the purpose was really to just give more to the Dungeon Master. Here are the stat blocks, here are the tactics, here's some new flavor text. Here are some ways you can weave this into the plot in ways that the campaign doesn't have time to go into. So it can be fun to add on to an existing campaign. Sometimes you can get lost with saying, well, am I fixing the campaign or am I making it more complicated?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the kind of benefit of using like the term kind of companion, is the fact that, you know, it's an assistive tool. You know, it's not necessarily a replacement. It's just the idea of like, oh, you know, there are some kind of areas where you could maybe spruce things up, or, you know, to like kind of flavor to your DM's individual taste, to use like a culinary. I must say, it feels like you were cut out for work when it comes to Dungeon of the Mad Mage, though, because how many? There's like 20?
There's 25 floors.
That's
25 floors.
Yeah.
Yep. Actually, no, 24 floors, and then I added a 25th chapter that acted as an overview for the campaign and added a bunch of other plot twists that you would need to know in advance before you start the whole thing.
So I must admit I don't know, I kind of have a soft spot for Dungeon of the Mad Mage, but I feel like in like the D&D kind of adventure scope of things, it sometimes does get a bit of like a hard rap of like.
It does because you have to restrict the player's arsenal if you want it to work. And there's nothing really keeping the players from just leaving for Waterdeep. That was one of the driving forces behind Hallister Blackcloak is running a game show. You can try to leave Waterdeep, but if you don't come back in time, here's a wish spell. But then that gets into railroading. So it's a double-edged sword.
I think what I kind of like, because I think because it did follow Waterdeep Dragon Heist, I can kind of see what they're going for, is because from Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is exceedingly RP heavy and stuff like that, you know, there are kind of encounter locations, and, you know, but the overview is like you're just trying to, you know, having this kind of impromptu mad dash adventure throughout the city. I thought kind of the intention of Dungeon of the Mad Mage was kind of to offer that kind of like counter, but okay, well, here's dungeon crawling. This is as
right.
As hardcore Dungeons and Dragons as you get. It's like dungeon after dungeon.
As classic as it gets.
Yeah. But I don't know. It just feels weird having them back to back, because I feel like if you were to do, I want to do the Waterdeep storyline, to go from Dragon Heist into Dungeon of the Mad Mage, I feel like the characters are going to have like severe whiplash. It's like
they do.
Yeah. It's so yeah, I can see why you would kind of want this kind of. And I must admit, I do kind of love the idea of like a game show, because it isn't like Hallister. He's all about apprentices, or like trying to kind of build people up and eventually betray them or kill them in some way. But, you know, he definitely,
or just leave them to rot.
Yeah. You know, that's
in the companion, I even advocate if you have a wizard or a sorcerer, or even a bard, Hallister would be interested in them as an apprentice if they survive the dungeon.
If that's kind of the important part. So then I guess kind of the kind of so was there any kind of I guess kind of what is my question? Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. No, what I was going to ask is generally why create the companions exactly? Was it more just like it felt like a natural progression in the type of products you were creating, or was there like a particular drive?
Well, I was friends with Aventier Games, and I saw his Waterdeep Dragon Heist guide, and I thought, well, I was already doing. I always wanted to advise people on Curse of Strahd, but Curse of Strahd was ancient history. I actually got my start in DM's Guild by Curse of Strahd supplements, like the Castle Ravenloft flowchart map, the Escaping Death House skill challenge, the flavor text for Death House, and so it just felt like a natural progression. I talked to Aventier about it. He went by Jay Valur back then, and it just seemed like an awesome product. Give more power to the DMs, lighten the load of campaign. And I felt really good about that, about making sure that when you play a campaign, it is as streamlined as possible.
Yeah. No, fair. No, I was say it is weird to think on. I suppose like it's not weird, but it's kind of nice that the DMs Guild definitely has spaces for things like the Castle Raven flowchart. You know, things that like, because again, the castle is huge, it's expansive, which is great because that's kind of the feeling you want. But for the players and stuff like that, or like the DM and stuff like that, it's like, you've gone upstairs now, and it's like.
Actually, earlier you asked me why I got started, and I didn't even answer your question. I just went on about Death House. I got started because of the flowchart map. I was working in Japan as a teacher. My players and I were all leaving at the end of our contracts. We had very little time left. We were running a Roll20 Curse of Strahd campaign. This is where I actually wrote the wedding at Ravenloft and tested it. I didn't have enough time to try to analyze the map in the book and say, oh, well, maybe you're on the third floor. I sat down one weekend and pounded out this entire color-coded flowchart map, single page, so that I could make sure I knew where the players were like that.
Yeah.
And then I came back to America. I was talking with a friend that was like, well, why don't you start writing? She had listened to me complain and be like, I wish I could do all the DM's Guild. Yeah. I love Dungeons and Dragons. Why can't I be like them? And she said, why don't you just try? So thanks to her, the flow chart was polished up and put out, and that was my first product. And it's people really liked it. So I kept writing.
As I say, have you ever thought about maybe like returning to the Castle Ravenloft map like flowchart formula? Or I suppose there hasn't necessarily been as many.
It hasn't been as in demand.
Yeah, there's not been as many huge scale multi-roomed castles. No, interesting. So then I guess the kind of over the kind of the the time that you've been developing things on the DM's Guild, what would you say has kind of been your design process? Has it always kind of been like reading the kind of source material from the ground up? Because it seems like, again, from a lot of the creators I kind of talk to, you make the most of like, the official like license that we have on the DM's Guild.
Right. Wizards IP sells like hotcakes. So part of it is always trying to keep an eye on what's out there and keeping your finger on the pulse of the marketplace. Because we all have limited time. As much as I want to get lost in my own daydreams, I still have to pay bills. Yep. So just like with Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft came out, everyone knew that there were no statistics for the Dark Lords. So in a fit of paranoia, I said, someone's going to write that, and it's gotta be me. Yeah. And so me, Chris Hopper, and Matt Wolf worked together to produce this product, which actually hit front page last week. Yeah, last week.
I think as of us chatting, it's still kind of like towards like the top 5 of like so it sounds like chasing the pulse has been a big motivator for you.
Yes, although to be honest, I do want to start being able to focus on my own stuff. I do have a Patreon that I hope will grow with more encounters, more subclass options. As much freedom the guild has given me in terms of writing, it is a bit. It's not so great that you have to stay resigned to the Forgotten Realms or Eberron and such. Plenty of other creators want to explore their own settings and worlds, which is something I too want to do. I
think I've said this again before though, but it does feel like the natural kind of progression that the working within the Forgotten Realms or the Dungeons & Dragons IP is kind of a great way to kind of get your feet wet in terms of like writing RPGs. And I think it is that eventually a point where, you know, every writer, they grow their wings, they're ready to fly the nest, and and you know they take flight. But yeah, so I kind of cut you off a little bit there with kind of like chasing the pulse and everything like that. But back to kind of like your kind of creative process then, like. So say let's just take prior to Dark Lords of Ravenloft, if we go to the Icewind Dale, you know the book's coming, you have the book in your hands, you kind of want to write some companions to it. What's your process?
The process is first reading it as a dungeon master, then reading it again as a designer, and seeing what I disagree with, seeing. You need the full picture, and that's a problem that dungeon masters don't always get. You have to read the entire module cover to cover to capture everything. And so as I read the second time, I mark what would be helpful in that situation. That's where I go page by page. For the creative process, for other things like encounter design, I have a very large list of just half thought out encounters or subclass ideas, and I'm just itching always to get back to them. I'm a very irresponsible daydreamer. I'm supposed to be working with the deadline on this project. Meanwhile, all I want to do is write something that's probably never going to see the light of day.
It's the siren call of any other project other than your
Exactly.
So I guess kind of the when it comes to filling out like a individual encounter, do you, because I like there's I think it's Brendan Lee Mulligan kind of has this kind of encounter format of like each encounter, like to kind of make it as engaging as possible, should have like environmental aspects, there should be a timed element, there should be non-combat focused tasks, as well as I think that there's one more as well, which is timed elements, environment, interesting creatures, and but there's a rule of 4. I'm forgetting off the top of my head now. Do you follow or subscribe to any kind of methodology like that, or you just kind of?
I do. Typically, I tell myself an encounter has to at least involve 2 pillars. It can't solely be combat unless it's supposed to be a humorous event or a parody of something. I once wrote an encounter called Keep Lukewarm for the Arctic encounters. The adventurers find a Githyanki warrior and a human rogue chilling out in the belly of a Axebeak.
Oh, nice.
AKA Tauntaun.
Yeah.
And a Yeti's lurking in the hills nearby. That was mostly combat, and it was clearly a parody of something, if I mention, might get us sued.
Yeah, it's it's a homage, it's that those are allowed, I think.
Parody rule. Parody laws, they count. So typically I make sure that I involve at least 2 of the pillars. I prefer social encounters, or at least like to humanize the combatants. I like to humanize the combatants, or at least subvert tropes. Then I go through, can there be a reward to this? Can there be gold? Can there be a trinket? Can there be a magic item? I follow a loose order of things I at least need to consider before I can say an encounter is finished.
So one thing I always like to find is not necessarily always having like a physical reward. Sometimes I kind of like to use it as almost like an RP hook, to be like, as a result of this, you may call upon a favor from X in the future, because it's kind of nice to kind of have like the heroes be like, oh, remember 3 weeks ago we saved that there's 2 people from the Yeti, we can probably call upon them to do some smuggling for us. I think that's
for something like that with calling on favors, the problem I often find is I have to keep the encounter so setting agnostic that it's hard to be able to link it back up with those characters, which is just one of the problems with having those sorts of encounters.
Yeah, you do kind of have to keep it abstract to be the case of like, oh, they live within like a nearby settlement of which they have some political sway in some manner, or they own a shop. The go-to one is like, oh, they're a trader and they can offer things at half price. Or,
right.
Or I think even the thing of like, you can say, oh, you save me, things are half priced, and the players will probably still haggle. to be like, you know, a little cheaper. Let's, you know, we just like, yeah.
I hate shopping episodes as a player and a dungeon master. I hate shopping episodes.
They have their place. I think, you know, especially when
I think they have their place once in a campaign. Once.
You get one. Everyone has like one shopping ticket that they're allowed to redeem, and then
after that, just send me your shopping list in a Discord message, please.
I think again, it's good to think of like, especially in higher level campaigns, you can just have, you know, just like you can just hire someone and they can do the shopping for you. You can get underlings, you know, they can, you know, unpaid interns. They can just, you know, run away and do all these things. But when it comes to, you know, filling out or actually, you know, starting the, you know, the chipping away at a design, maybe not when there's 101 of them. But what would you say is your favorite part? And then on the other side of the coin, what was your least favorite part of you know,
of encounter design in general?
Of everything, I suppose. Yeah, of just
of writing in general.
Of the craft.
The daydreaming episode is my favorite, where you're not worried about word counts and page limits or your budget. It's just, this is a cool idea, I want to run with it. The hardest part is the last 10% of any product, of actually finishing it, where you know you need 10 more words to really finish this thought or this encounter, and you just cannot find them. That's the part I hate the most. Second to that is finding art. You know, DM's Guild writers don't typically have a huge budget for their adventures unless they want to publish at cost or in the hole. So finding art is typically the most stressful part for me.
I was say, do you have any? Do you typically go through kind of the same sort of avenues where you scour the, you know, the DM's Guild art that they give you, as well as then going through, like, you go through drive-through, and then after that you kind of begin to go through the lens of like Creative Commons?
I am a fierce hierophant of the Church of Dean Spencer.
Yeah.
Favorite artist on Drive-Thru RPG. Love the guy. Love his art. Yeah. If he puts something out there, you can be sure I'm going to use it somehow.
Yeah, I think it's always kind of like the more mundane ones of like, oh, Dean has done some really nice like collection of axes and swords. Just kind of like abstract. It's like that just goes. I've mentioned an axe here. Yep. Splat. There you go. Done.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, I must admit, I think it would be like, it's got to be like, to be an artist, to be able to like, especially doing like kind of stock art, to think about, I've got like my art in like, geez, I like thousands, like literally at this point, probably thousands of products that every day that people kind of flick through. And so I also did want to kind of touch in about the idea, like the kind of daydreaming process of just like, you know, just kind of, do you kind of, is there any sort of like second pass where you're just like, okay, well, on the first pass, I was like, this seemed like a really good idea, but under kind of close examination, the you know, the idea didn't necessarily hold up as much, or?
Oh yeah, definitely. In phase 2, you have to be responsible and you have to be economical. You go through and it's like, this is not the lore for a Minotaur, or this isn't really worth anyone's time. That's a bit disappointing, but it's a necessary part of the creative process of looking at your own work analytically.
Interesting though. So is it that there is always a balance between, okay, well, there isn't necessarily the lore to support this, but then kind of going back to like the idea of like, sometimes it's sometimes the best intention to kind of subvert the tropes of what players expect. How do you sometimes try and walk that line? Because obviously sometimes by subverting the trope, you're kind of veering out of the lore.
It's tough. Sometimes you think, it's like with humor, you think something's hilarious, so you tell it to one friend, it's not.
Yeah.
Sometimes subversion with the tropes just falls flat. You just kind of have to hope that whoever buys your product, whoever reads your encounter and runs it, has the same type of humor or the same interests as you do.
Yeah, and I must admit, I think like when it comes to at least encounter design in particular, I think most of my humor probably just comes up in coming up with the pun to call the encounter.
Yes, I had an encounter in the seafaring one called Holy Diver. That's literally how I started the encounter. I was looking for keywords, and I was listening to music, and Holy Diver, of course. And so I made an encounter where a priest of whatever god is the one that turned in Forgotten Realms lore, the Atlantean stand-in for a god who turned some humans into Atlanteans. I can't Aventurnus.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that esoteric lore. Yeah, being a 5e baby where there's no lore at all.
Yeah.
but that was the start of the encounter. It was a funny name that I just abused until it made sense as an encounter. So they meet the Holy Diver, who devotes himself to rescuing a priest who devotes himself to being a lifeguard, essentially. And you said earlier, what's a reward? Making sure that this character can help you out. The reward for that encounter was, if they're good aligned characters, or at least show that they are, the Holy Diver will accompany them for a while.
Yeah. I thought you meant like in their time of need, the Holy Diver will descend from the heavens and dive in to save them from.
As long as they're on the ocean, that's also a possibility.
Yeah, I like the idea of like, you know, they're having trouble on land, and then just like off in the distance there's the shore where the Holy Diver's like, I could help, but I'm just. Yeah. That's not really my problem. Yeah. So, yeah, no, awesome. So then I guess, I get more of like a kind of like personal question then, in terms of like across all the work you've done with all the hardcovers, would you say you have like a particularly favorite one?
You said of all the modules?
Of all the modules, yes.
Oh, Curse of Strahd, hands down. Curse of Strahd. My first introduction to D&D, I've ran it about 3 times. One time where they actually won during the wedding at Ravenloft. They managed to survive that. I had a campaign a few weeks ago, but they all realized that they weren't cut out for Barovia and said, we don't want to play this anymore. Yeah. They wanted something much more lighthearted.
That's yeah, it's understandable.
We want to be able to win, they said to me. So Curse of Strahd is my favorite, hands down. And I think its strength as a module is that it has a well-defined villain who can be as involved in the plot as possible, a closed ecosystem where the players must play ball, and you don't have any of the hijinks that happen when you get too high of a level.
Yeah, I think I must admit the kind of the scope of Barovia as a whole, it feels like it kind of hits that kind of nice area where, again, it is quite expansive, and the players can definitely kind of like, you know, spend their time going to every kind of corner.
Right.
But everything kind of within in it is kind of a nice kind of callback to kind of steer the characters back towards, you know, Strahd in some way or another.
Exactly.
It kind of, everything that's going on is like, you can't go anywhere but people going, Strahd's the devil. And it's like, okay, yeah, no, we know. He's causing some trouble.
Yep. In Barovia, all roads lead back to Ravenloft, essentially.
So,
I actually go with a Voldemort rule in my Curse of Strahd campaigns, where everyone everyone addresses him as the devil.
Yep.
If you say his name, it apparently, according to superstition, attracts his dark attention. You say it 3 times, it's an invitation to come indoors.
Ooh,
which as a vampire you can't normally do. Yeah. So the players they have to go through the campaign making sure that they don't say Strahd in or out of character. I always say a peal of thunder echoes out across the sky or something like that.
I mean, in fairness, like that's kind of one of the ways that you kind of balance the kind of almost like horror aspect that sometimes can get lost in a Curse of Strahd campaign, just because, like, you know, with the players go antics that sometimes they're not always fully aware that, like, at any point there's a vampire who is 9 times out of 10 more powerful than you guys.
Right.
No, it's interesting. I've got like a Strahd campaign at the moment, and just as of last week they've arrived in Kresk, where they can, yeah.
I love Kresk. I changed a few things around to ensure that I might as well just say it. Spoilers for Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
I always have usually Irina's with them. Without fail, they've had Irina with them. She gets called to the White Gazebo. You know what happens. She has that chance to finally be happy.
Yep.
Well, then I rob the players of that with a thunderbolt from Strahd. Kills Irina. They've seen the abbot already resurrect someone, and as dusk begins to fall, they know that the only option is to bring Irina up to the abbey and have her brought back to life. That's my go-to. Jeez.
Well, so I have a few problems with that. One, my party doesn't have Irina anymore. She was captured by Strahd.
Well, that's why I have Strahd capture at the gates after that.
Yeah, no, it was the case of like it's funny. A case of like they've just kind of left like the village of Barovia. They have, you know, Ismark and Irina with them, and they were just like Strahd. They could go left to Vlaki, or they go right to Strahd's castle, and they're like, let's go right. Let's go check it out.
Why? Who would do that?
You know, a good number of them are kind of like new players, and they want to have agency. Yeah. They want to, and I can't stop them. So what I kind of have in my favor is that they have the sword is actually at the gazebo for them. So they have kind of a reason to go there, and I'm kind of tempted to just have the kind of abbot at the the gazebo, because it does mention that sometimes he kind of wanders out to kind of and just have them engage with this very weird individual, and just maybe they can entice them upstairs to like go, oh, Leah, take a look at my collection of brides.
Yes.
Yeah. Excited. So I think I'm kind of with you. I think like for the longest time, my favorite hardcover has probably been Dragon Heist, just because I kind of like the energy of it. I'm
not a fan of Dragon Heist.
Fair.
I'm a fan of Waterdeep as a setting.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of how Dragon Heist was presented in the book.
Yes. I think in terms of like what I've kind of done in my running of it and stuff like that, I've kind of leaned away from the chase chain.
Exactly. You have to, in my opinion.
And what I've kind of done instead is I must admit, I haven't picked a villain. I've just thrown them all in.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Yeah, which is more of a headache. Well, okay, I've thrown all of them in other than the Xanathar's Guild, but just because they're kind of like almost kind of like omnipresent and, they're kind of like, causing trouble here and there. But yeah, having the interplay between Manchun, the Castellantas, and Jarl Axel has been really kind of exciting.
When I ran it, I chose Castellantas as the true villains, but of course they were buddy with the adventurers. I didn't use Jarl Axel. I felt like I had enough going on. Mm-hmm. I really focused on the street war between Xanathar's Guild and Zentarum.
Yeah.
Didn't even ever actually get to Manchun. Didn't need to for some reason. But they eventually did have to do a heist in Xanathar's lair, which was tense for everybody, being level 4.
Yeah. See, I think that's the kind of the cool part is like when the Stone of Galore doesn't end up in anyone's hands and it ends up in the villains, that they kind of have to we have to go get it. So yeah, we had the similar thing where the Castellantas, they got the Stone of Galore, they just received it just as the Castellantas were running a gala. Mm-hmm. So they all got tickets to the gala, and they just had to kind of, just act as normal as they could as they kind of tried to search the premises for the.
That is what I loved about Dragon Heist, is that it presents that spy genre in a way.
Yeah.
I just felt like the campaign should have really focused on that.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough framework. I wanted my players to go into galas and opera houses and have to try to shake hands with the right people. And the campaign just didn't really deliver on that.
Yeah, I must admit, another thing as well, it's one of the curious ones where you may need to play around with the kind of, I suppose, the instigating event to kind of like get the players, because it goes from like, oh, there's a gang war going on, to like, oh, there's a treasure trove that you're all kind of chasing after, and if the players aren't necessarily gold focused, which can happen, where it's just it's just like, well, my players, I've got like a wizard, like a one of my characters is a wizard in like an academy, and they're just like, I've got classes,
Yes, but the motivation of paying your wizard debt.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's a good way to kind of frame it. Okay, so thank you, dude. That was, again, I don't normally get to chat about like my own campaigns and stuff like that on this. It's nice to kind of go down that rabbit hole and talk about like
every dungeon master wants to talk about their campaigns, but no one else does except other dungeon masters.
Yeah, again, this is again another excuse why I have the podcast. It's like it's therapy for me to kind of get out. Like, I don't know why my players are doing stuff. I need help. But to bring it back to. Okay, on topic, back to you.
Oh, yeah.
Smooth segue. To you as a designer then, over everything you've kind of done, has there been a very kind of a particular design choice that you've made that you've been kind of particularly proud of?
I was proud of Darren's class feats because I felt like I was thinking outside the box. But other than that, I wish I had something I could say, like, I discovered the X amount of uses by proficiency bonus before Tasha's did, but no, I don't believe I have anything like that.
Well, I must admit, the idea of like class feats and stuff like that, it is interesting because there are so many kind of different like interplays of like design space around D&D that just hasn't necessarily been toyed with, and the idea of going in with like class feats of like players love feats.
They do.
And no, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of like there's kind of the idea that sometimes when you allow players to kind of create their character, allowing them to have like a free feat, while sometimes it does kind of shift, their power levels a little bit. Sometimes the feats are kind of like allow characters kind of defining traits of their character. It's the idea of like I want to create like a investigator or someone who's increasingly observant, and then to have give them the observant trait, then it's it kind of the mechanics they have kind of builds in. What was your kind of idea that like when you have like an ability score increase or choose a feat, you could just choose a class feat, or were there certain levels where you would just get a class feat?
Well, for the sake of balance, I had to do it with ability score improvement. At my own tables, I believe feats should be given out as rewards to players. They should have more options to pick it, especially with the class feats, which I always shill to my own players. I wanted the class feats to be a way for you to further customize your class. I had a druid feat where you're basically the hive lord. You have a swarm of bees. I had a clown feat. No, I had a mime feat for bards.
Nice.
Just all these small things that weren't big enough to be subclasses, but worth pursuing anyway.
Yeah.
The problem with subclasses is that you can't always fit the same concept across every single level that the class needs.
Yeah,
so those get discarded.
A capstone mime feat. I can't imagine it unless it's like the things you mime become real. Just like you're now in a box.
It's been like a year or two since I wrote it. I think there was the silence spell.
Nice.
There was a few like gimmicks in it that I can't remember now.
But it kind of touches on that thing we were chatting about, where like I don't know what it is about feats, but they do allow for like a good amount of like characterization, and kind of to allow, again, it makes sense for like a bardic entertainer to kind of, maybe they went to like mime school once, for a week, or and suddenly I think it always goes to like it's the idea of like you take a week of juggling and then you're juggling for the rest of your life, you can't stop.
Right.
And then, so that's another thing as well. So there wasn't only just the one class feats. You actually came up with like a sequel.
Yes, Volume 2, which was another 100 feats. Then I have about half of Class Feats 3 written. But I've been saying it's been written for about a year now because other projects have taken precedence.
Yeah.
So while I do want to finish that and make a nice little trilogy, I'm not certain when I can get that back on my docket.
So, but that's kind of what's nice about to kind of have those projects kind of on the back burner. But what I find interesting about sequels and stuff like that is because you obviously, over the process of creating the first one, you come up with more ideas, but you also learn more about kind of the kind of...
Exactly.
What would you say has kind of been the changes from the feats in the first one to the feats in the second?
Well, I got a lot of feedback for Class Feats 1 for balance attunement. And as every creator knows, balance is pretty subjective.
Yeah.
I leaned more into really iconic stuff. The first volume was about fixing certain flaws or building on certain subclasses. Both volumes have like specific feats for, say, the Barbarian Storm Herald.
Okay.
Where it's determined by subclass. I had general feats for each class and then subclass ones. The first volume was about trying to fix like a Way of the Four Elements monk. I reduced. You take the feat, you learn a few more elemental attunements, and the key cost gets reduced a little bit for all of these things. And I thought that was a great idea. Then people online said, "Well, you've just made this a mandatory feat for every Way of the Four Elements monk," which was a very disheartening because no one has a gun up to your head saying you need to pick the most optimal choices for your character.
Yeah. I
was just a nerd trying to fix the Avatar monk subclass.
Yeah, it is that kind of weird one where, especially when again, especially when it does come to kind of balance and stuff, like the idea of like there are like must take like ability score, like like the way you can't have that and stuff like that, and there's it kind of ignores the fact that some people can just have unoptimal builds, but when it comes to, it's that weird one. I don't want to say like the Avatar monk is like badly designed or like, but it's a case of like where there are elements of it that for the player can sometimes be unfun, and you as a designer are like, let's try and make it a little bit more engaging,
Yeah. So to be criticized for, oh, you've made a mandatory choice, that was pretty disheartening.
Yeah. So I guess were there some of the kind of so on the more positive side of the feedback stuff, were there some things that you kind of did with your feats that you will kind of receive quite well?
Again, I really focused on subclass ones now that I felt that the general feats were finished. In the second volume, I did get to start working with mounted combat. I had a Sipahi feat for barbarians that really incentivized getting on horseback. There was a warlock feat that got you fine steed. That one was pushing the budget a little bit on power, but I felt it was very thematic. I called it, I think, Pale Rider, to really weave in with it. And I think it's been a long time, Matt. It's been a long time, but I think I stipulated like what you can summon. It might have been like a skeletal warhorse or something.
Oh yeah, it can't be like your bog standard like normal horse. It's got to be a little funky,
a little creepy. Yeah. For the third volume, I've been leaning more into what I call divine feats. So I'm not a DM that would say your character has to be religious. In fact, I'm the opposite. But say you have a rogue that really worships a god of thieving. I made a feat that it didn't really have a real prerequisite as a mechanic, but it said it would be like you can cast Arcane Lock or Knock once a day. The god of thieves is giving you the A-OK to start thieving more.
Yeah.
That's the sort of stuff I want to explore more. The really funky stuff. I even had a note in the volume 3 that said it's time to get funky.
No, I must admit, I kind of like that because like at least the kind of it's sometimes I struggle to imagine like what it would be like living in the Forgotten Realms, where the fact that you have a huge pantheon of gods that are confirmed to be real in every kind of imaginable way, and they kind of mention this within like Waterdeep and within like the Gazetteer that most people, they make offerings to multiple gods. That's kind of just their way of life. If they're going out and about, if they've got like, if they're taking a boat trip, they make a donation to, I feel bad calling it the sea bitch.
The bitch queen, Umberly.
Yeah, Umberly.
Yeah.
There you go, Umberly.
I remember that because I had an encounter involving her in the Arctic thing. Yeah. Sorry for the seafaring thing.
I can only hope that like Umberly, like she calls herself the bitch queen. She's like, I'm like, that's it's not other people calling her that. It's like she's
owning it.
Yeah, she's owning it. Yeah, because she drowns people. I think you can't. You have to be somewhat
a terrifying god.
Yeah. You have to be you're somewhat self-aware. Like I do drown. I will hold my hand up and say I've drowned 1 or 2 people. But yeah, and I sometimes I think it's nice to kind of even if the players aren't necessarily, they don't have like easy for clerics and paladins because they have it kind of but for some of the other classes, in fact, to sometimes like lead into like, there's gods, so they're watching you, and especially with like doing like a huge like again doing like pulling off a master heist for the god of thieves to look at this rogue like, you got my blessing. Like whether you like it or not, you're now one of my champions. And to I guess to have that almost like like you mentioned, like narrative feat to be like, because of what you've done, here is a feat. That's kind of a cool way to do it. Nice.
I'm not actually a fan of having confirmed gods, but Forgotten Realms is the default setting, so you kind of have to write with it in mind. Yeah, I'm more of a fan of the Elder Scrolls or of World of Warcraft, where you don't really know 100% that a god is real, but you know that the divine power is real.
Yeah, I suppose that probably is the way about. It's again, that's another thing of like where I'm not entirely sure whether if you look at it through the lens of like the day-to-day resident of like a city, it's like how much do they know? Like
exactly, like the Wall of the Faithless is the most horrific thing in Forgotten Realms lore for me. You're an agnostic or an atheist, you're spending all eternity as a brick.
I feel like you gotta like, I suppose with an expansive pantheon, just hedge your bets, just
hedge your bets.
Hedge your bets. So talking about again, going between like class feat 1 to class feat 2, there was like a number of kind of lessons learned that you picked up, just kind of putting that kind of content out there on your journey as a whole as a creator, is there any kind of particular lesson that you wish you'd maybe learned sooner, or that you would pass on to?
Like... so many. God. Number one, visuals matter. I used to think it wouldn't really matter if my product wasn't that visually appealing. People would like the words, but people like to look with their eyes. Surprise, surprise. So going forward, I have to be more mindful about the presentation of a product. With the 101 Arctic Encounters, I released that in the same flood as all the other writers did, and I saw like Chris Eichhorn's Tome of Adventures for Icewind Dale. Beautiful looking product. Yeah. He had about 10 or 11 adventures, and it made gold almost overnight. Yeah. And I had 100 really fleshed out encounters, 103 pages, and it didn't really get any traction. And I was like, why you can't shirk on your presentation anymore. You have to actually have a graphic designer, because I'm not mindful about art at all. I'm not I don't know anything about graphic design. I can hardly hold a pen, let alone draw on a tablet. So I really have to start turning to professionals going forward. That's my big lesson. Because
I think another way of looking at it is like when it comes to like the layout of your pages and stuff like that, even though you can have like the free kind of preview, but on the store page itself, like having like a spread of the pages and with the art and stuff like that, even though you do kind of you cherry pick the most pretty pages to kind of put on it, it does kind of help. And even though they can't help it, the players, the kind of purchaser, they're not necessarily looking at the words, even though that's what they're buying the product for. They're looking at kind of the package as a whole. And yeah, I think I kind of add on to kind of what you said, that it's almost kind of the journey is to kind of like, as you kind of create more products and you get more confident, you just kind of begin to like delegate or just hire people to do the stuff that you need help with. I think that my mind was blown the first time I handed layout to someone else, and I was like, wow. Yeah.
I was so relieved. I was working on Barovia Born and Raised with TTRPG, and Matt Wolf was our editor, and it was actually the first time I had an actual editor, and I didn't have to do layout. I got to write as much as I wanted to, and then just call it a day after that, and it was so relieving. Yeah. That's why I called on Matt for Dark Lords of Ravenloft, and I immediately found Chris Hopper and said, please take this burden from me.
Well, I imagine, again, when it comes to, like, again, trying to, with Dark Lord of Ravenloft, again, because what was kind of good about the whole sort of Dark Lord kind of stuff is the fact that prior to the book coming out, people were aware that there weren't kind of stat blocks in the traditional sense.
Well, that was people knew that about a week in advance.
Yeah, so to be able to turn that around in a week, it kind of leans itself to kind of needing help. It's just like, otherwise, it's
absolutely
you versus the world.
It takes a village.
Yeah. But no, I get really kind of I like with kind of the Dark Lords of Ravenloft. How quick was the turnaround on that, would you say?
I think it was probably 2.5 weeks. I found out with everyone else about a week before the book release that there weren't stats, and I knew that it'd be a great opportunity. And again, I love Curse of Strahd, so I was already jonesing for this book anyway. Yeah. So I contacted Matt and Chris about a week in advance and told them, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if someone like MT Black or Oliver Darkshire already wrote this, you know. So we might not even be able to go to print. But as soon as that book comes out, I'm starting. And it came out, D&D Beyond, and that very moment, I was just digging through it, analyzing all the Dark Lords in their domains. So I think there's 16 Dark Lords. I think I was doing 4 every 2 or 3 days. And then just as soon as they were done, give them off to Matt for the first round of editing, get them back, then start testing them out again, back and forth.
Wow, so like a full like treadmill of production of just
yes.
Well, actually, that kind of like segues nicely into kind of like my next question of like, again, as you kind of mentioned, as one thing you wish sooner was kind of collaborating, kind of getting more people involved to kind of talk about the kind of community as a whole. Is there who are some of the people in the tabletop RPG community who kind of particularly inspire you?
When I first started out, people like Val Sareen and Eventier Games inspired me a lot, and then I started talking with them and felt awesome to actually start making friends and such. Val and I talk every day, and I'm actually working on one of his monster hunts with him. Someone I really admire is Grimpress, Trevor Armstrong. Trevor has really grown his business. I've been come next month. I've been doing this for 3 years, and I think Grimpress started probably that same year, and Trevor has grown his community to a huge number of fans. Has an entire team of editors, cartographers, everything. The dude gets it. Yes. Conversions. He has a whole team for conversions. That guy knows what he wants, and he's gonna get it. And I really admire his drive. Other people I admire is like Oliver Darkshire. I love his tone for every single product he puts out. And every product he puts out is exactly who he wants to be. There's no hiding. There's no being nice for the consumer. He knows what he's writing, and boom, doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. And I really admire that.
I think it's nice when you can tell that certain creators have such a distinct voice that comes across in their writing as a fan. And it's something that we all kind of aspire towards. Anyone else? Sorry, I just want
some of the Titans like DM Dave. I hope to one day be in his shadow or something like that. If I could be as prolific as him in even a fraction.
There's so many people. I like that question. It always kind of gives me the kind of warm fuzzies. Because it's kind of been like then I guess kind of looking more to the future then. So that you've got kind of Class Feats 3 in the works. You've got like a number of other things. Would you say that you kind of still have like a dream project, or is that kind of looking towards your own setting and that sort of thing?
Well, I'd love to kickstart my own setting eventually. I do want to start moving more products off the guild soon. I love the guild that it gives writers a chance to spread their wings, and I feel like I'm getting to that point where I don't want to be bound by WotC or IP or the Forgotten Realms. So kickstarting my own setting would definitely be a dream. God knows I've been dreaming of Fantasy World since I was a kid. I have one I really want to do called Decadacia, which is it's fantasy Y2K, Matt.
Nice.
For 10,000 years, all the magic in the world, the magic that has automated industry, solved world hunger, and levitated vast cities into the sky. It's all about to crash.
Nice.
It's all dependent on one planar convergence that is now starting to recede, and it's basically fantasy. It's Y2K, but it actually happens. And the great cities crash from the sky, unleashing great earthquakes that rock the world. The magic fails for a few years. That's my dream.
Is this a case where it's like as the players and stuff out, you're literally like the night of like you counting down the timer, or is this a case where like it's been like a year or two since this Y2K?
So I know what I would write as a story. My dream is actually to be a novelist. I just love to write D&D in the meantime. If it was a story, it would be thinking of it as like a trilogy of like the first book would be The Eve of Ruin or something. But as a D&D campaign, you would want to hand that to your players saying, you might be able to stop the apocalypse. I'd have as a TTRPG product, I'd have 2 ages basically. Before the crash, after the crash, maybe about 20 years later.
I think because it's nice to kind of see that progression of like how people kind of begin to trope of like essentially being reset, going back to like step 1 of like we have
basically a post-apocalyptic world.
Jeez. Hot damn. That's that. Yeah. I like that concept. I like the idea of a magical Y2K.
Most of my ideas start with humor like that. Y2K, but it actually happens.
The Y2K we had was really disappointing. Nothing fun happened. Jeez.
Family Guy told me it would be different.
I'm holding out for a Y3K. That's got my fingers crossed for that one. Well, what was it? Looking at the time, Wyatt, we've done it. We've managed to chat away just about an hour. But I never want to end without hearing some of the interesting stuff of like 1, what you're currently working on, and 2, where can we hear about some of this cool stuff? So
I'm currently working on the Comets and Comments and Cockpits Kickstarter with you. You know, you're on it. I'm one of the stretch goal writers.
Successfully funded.
Writing a 5,000. Yes, very proud of Cam and his team. Very glad I could be part of that. 5,000 word adventure for that. No spoilers. I'm working on encounter packs for my Patreon. I really do love the themed encounters. But 100 is far too much. So I'll be releasing packs of 10 each month. I've already written the desert pack. The next one is going to be taverns and then urban.
I mean,
that's what I want to do going forward.
10 a month, that sounds more reasonable, I think, for your own sake at the very least.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, there's always some shadow of some obligation looming over me that I can't remember.
Yeah.
Feels like I'm missing something, and I'm going to wake up later tonight freaking out. But yeah.
Yeah, there's some stuff maybe coming out that you know, it will.
I remembered it. Sorry.
No.
I'm working on a companion for Curse of Strahd with Trevor from Grim Press editing it. TTRPG is doing custom maps for it, and Trevor's also doing the layout. This is my big love letter to Curse of Strahd. I've written the first couple chapters. It aligns with the book. Chapter 1 is the overview. Chapter 2 is the lands of Barovia. And these things are huge. So far, before our editor has gone to it, they're 20,000 words a piece because I don't know how to shut up. I really don't.
Is the plan to kind of put it all together into one massive book, or like do what you did before and kind of split them up into chapters?
I'm going to do it chapter by chapter, then a bundle of the first 6, then another 5, then the last 5.
Wow.
And then one final deeply discounted companion that's probably going to be another 400 pager, just like Dungeon of the Mad Mage was. So
wow, geez. I mean, you don't go small, do you? You go big.
I don't. I really don't. Much to the chagrin of my editor.
Well, you know, that's I suppose the way to look at it, I suppose they're getting work.
Yeah, they're getting work. Yeah.
Well, Wyatt, thank you so much for taking some time out of your evening on the other side of the world to sit and have this chat. It's been delightful. I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. Oh, we need your handles as well before I forget.
Yeah. So I've got all the socials that the kids have these days. I've got an Instagram with no posts on it right now. I've got a Facebook with like 3 posts on it. I tweet occasionally. And I feel like there's something. Oh, I have a website. Yeah. So they're all Wyatt Trull. You just Google my name, look past the embarrassing mistakes of yesteryear, and then you got me.
There'll be a compendium of all sorts of links within the description. Yes. But yeah, no, it's good. It's good to have a brand. You got your name sorted. You've got your brand out there.
Yep.
But yeah, so I've been Matthew Whitby. You find me at Whitby Writes. Do I have anything coming out? No, but I will soon. I think I'm just going to make it sound like a threat. Soon, something will happen.
Yes. Prepare.
Yeah, prepare. Make peace with what you can. But that brings me to my final question then, which is how do you end a podcast?
Thought really hard about this, and the way you end a podcast is like The Sopranos. You just stop mid-sentence